So,
Mhm.
I mentioned that a lot of our departments cross over. You can't have an incredible event without incredible marketing to
Right.
back that up. You can't have the vendor partners there without vendor relations efforts. So
Yeah.
it all really comes together beautifully.
Hey there, and welcome to a brand new episode of Delivering Marketing Joy. I am your host, Kirby Hassman, and joining me today is a repeat rock star. And when I say rock star, I sincerely mean it. She has been on the Online 18 a bunch of times. She was on the Powerhouse Women of Promo recently. She's been a rising star. She's a senior director of marketing and vendor relations at ASB. Taylor Borst, thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, Kirby. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. You bet. Look, I always enjoy our conversations. And so I've been really looking forward to this. And so we all have lots of projects. And I know, especially in your role now, you got lots of projects and you're trying to keep them straight all the time. So I guess first question is, what are some projects you have that you're excited about or fired up about right now? And how are you prioritizing them?
Sure. Well, I think the way that I kind of think about just general projects that are kind of floating out there, I always split it by department, even though so many of our efforts are really intertwined with everything. So events is a big part of my job. We have an amazing team who puts these on. And so some of our upcoming events happening right now. So we have in April, we have an end user show happening in Minnesota where we actually bring in end user clients, and we have a lot of vendors who are signed up for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have in May, kind of a similar version of that happening in our Denver warehouse. So we're bringing some awesome partners in for that. There's even end user clients flying into that one. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
And then we also have what's called the ASB Accelerate event. It's a suite style event meeting where we have our partners and our sales associates who qualify go into those meetings. And it's just a couple jam-packed days of, really learning about what our partners are bringing to the table. And it's all about creating connection with those. So that is an awesome event. This will be our third annual version of Accelerate. So coming up there. And then in August, we have kind of a beefed up version of that. This will be our 10th anniversary of hosting our summit. So our summit is really for our top salespeople. They definitely qualify based on their annual sales. And it's just an incredible event. We're adding in a brand new piece of that where it's just a resort day where they can really enjoy the space. So that's kind of a new element of this. And then in March, which I know March of next year seems like a long time, but in an event planning space, that is no time at all. It's going to go in a blink of an eye. We're having our national sales conference in Palm Springs, California. So it's going to be gorgeous, but we are deep in planning mode for that already. Wow. And then on the marketing side, we have a website refresh that we are working on, and then updating a trend report for our sales associates to use for their end user customers, and really just show, what's new and trending overall from kind of an aesthetic standpoint.
Yeah.
What else? I feel like I'm just kind of running down the list, but honestly, we have such a great team and everybody works really well together. And so, I mentioned that a lot of our departments cross over. You can't have an incredible event without incredible marketing to back that up. You can't have the vendor partners there without vendor relations efforts. So it all really comes together beautifully.
That's a lot. You're right. And so I'm fascinated, and in interest of transparency, I was just at you guys' event there in Fort Worth, and that was really well done. And I'll come back to that. But so I'm curious about this. So you've been getting quite a bit of recognition lately, and so congratulations on that. That's awesome. Online 18 is always on annual list of online influencers. You've been on that for years. Powerhouse Women of Promo, a bunch of other stuff too. I'm curious, what do those types of recognition mean to you? What do they tell you? What do they mean?
Sure. Well, I'm glad that I have double doors on my office because my head won't fit through it, Kirby. You're being so kind. I also have to thank you and Bill for including me on the Powerhouse Women of Promo. That is so touching. I know that whole list. It's just incredible people in our industry made the cut this year. So it's just exciting to celebrate everything. And I'm grateful for this, but I also love these lists just to kind of discover, who should we be following? Who can we learn from? Who can
Yeah.
we connect? So that's always a great thing. I'm always like scouring those lists and, following them on social media, connecting, reaching out. So that's always super helpful just because of the relationships in this industry. I mean, we're such a people focused kind of industry that we have to rely on each other. I think that one thing when I joined this industry, years ago, I thought that the nature of competition was much more cutthroat. I didn't
Mm,
realize that the ability to collaborate, supplier to supplier, distributor to distributor would be so powerful and honestly like friendly in
yeah.
my experience. And so to be able to like rely and to network in that way has just been really special. And at the end of the day, I work so hard to be visible to serve American solutions for business, right? And so it's my job to make these connections in order to gain new resources for our salespeople out there in the fields, promoting events, trying to get excitement and participation in those, attracting new recruits. So people who are looking
Yeah.
for kind of a home base. It's all really that much more attainable when people are already familiar and kind of have a level of trust around that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think your point about collaboration between the competitors in the industry is a really interesting one. And I think that's gotten a lot better
Mm-hmm.
in the last even 10 years. And I
Mm-hmm.
actually attribute this to the rise of the Powerhouse Women of Promo, quite honestly. Like not because of the podcast, but because of women in leadership roles, I think have helped with the collaboration piece across the industry. That, again, I may be full of it on that, but that's my take on that. Is I believe that women in leadership roles have helped with collaboration in the industry. It's something that needed to improve for a long time. So I think that's a good observation by you. So you've been with ASB for just a minute now, right? A couple years now. And many people do know you. You mentioned from social media because that's been your role. But how has your role sort of evolved? How's it changed, and what have you learned in that way?
Sure. So by a couple years, it'll actually, it's crazy to think about this, but it'll be 9 years in
Wow.
May.
Yeah.
Um, so
Time
yeah, I
flies.
started when I was 15. It was, just an easy point of entry. No, but it's crazy how time goes by so quickly. And looking back, I'm in my fifth role in that 9 year time span,
Yeah.
and so I'm just incredibly grateful to even have the ability to grow into each of these roles.
Right.
It's kind of like I joke that it's like as soon as I figure something out or just get like feel like I'm kind of like, all right, I got this,
Right.
I kind of change course or I absorb something else, but that's what keeps it so exciting. And
Sure.
I think that if I felt like I was sitting idle for a minute, I think I would get really uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so how my role has really changed, especially over the last couple of years. I did just have a role change this past summer. But my job here is leading the marketing team, so both internal and external marketing efforts. Events like we kind of talked about, public relations, and now that role change happening this summer really opened me up to more of the back end of the vendor relations side of our business and of our industry, which has been a challenge, but it's been really exciting. I think that for the longest time, the relationship side of vendor relations has always been one of my favorite parts of my position, whether or not I had a direct like back end tie into it, but I'm learning so much about the contracts and the payment side of things and how to help with disputes when they arise, and just kind of pulling pulling in the right people and just understanding the full back end process has been just very insightful. I feel like I've grown so much just based on that. And, I have a lot of my team members to thank for that. Like, we'll have a meeting and I'll pull them aside and be like, okay, teach me about this portion of it. I didn't understand it in this meeting. So that's been just really exciting. And yeah, I think I learn 5 new things every single day. It's crazy.
That's cool. That's really cool. And congratulations. I mean, I just think that's really neat. So we talked about events earlier and how that part of your role we mentioned a couple of times has evolved. So obviously, like I mentioned, I went to the event I think it was in March. It's been a busy year. Maybe it was in February. Yeah. But I was in Fort Worth with you guys. I had an opportunity. I was really flattered to be invited. And it was awesome. So how do you create events that have great experiences, but also like create long lasting connections among the people who are at the event?
Sure. So we kind of joke internally that, our competition is whatever we did the year before. So so we're not, of course everybody wants to see like what other people are doing for their events, but
Sure.
really we are kind of stuck in this wonderful loop of, seeing what we did, what worked really well, and how can we make it even better for the next
Yeah.
time around. But when we take a step back and really look at the philosophy of this, and I also have to give a shout out to Dana Zazo, who is my direct boss and mentor, especially on the events and the vendor relations side of things, and
Yeah.
just kind of leading our team through that. But we do have this shared philosophy where every single person who steps foot onto our event is our customer. It's our team's customer, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a different way of thinking about it, but we want to make sure that even if they're not a salesperson with American, we're covering their flight and hotel and food and everything and making sure that it's so focused on them. But our guests and our vendor partners are just as valuable. And, in certain ways, we want to make sure that we're elevating that for them in different capacities, right? So do they find value? Do they find ROI? Are they enjoying themselves? Are they having enough connections with our salespeople? Are we creating agendas that are serving them in that way? It's that constant obsession with looking at every single perspective, every type of attendee, and thinking about, okay, what is the worst part of their agenda? What's the worst part of their day? How can we make it better? How can we
Mhm.
avoid it completely? And kind of thinking in that sense. Um, I would also say that attendee surveys have been something for years that we take very seriously as well. I mean, it's
Okay.
one thing to throw out a survey and ask them, how did you like the property? But it's another, to ask about, was there anybody on our team that really went above and beyond for you? Was there anybody on the vendor or the sales associate side that really stuck out? Why did they stick out? Finding those other pieces and thinking about how can we make a bigger impact in that way
Yeah.
has really helped us. And then we also have a vendor advisory board established that we end up running a lot of our ideas by, and a lot of them are kind of around events. So thinking, hey, if we introduce this, what would the impact on the vendors be? And we've gotten some really incredible feedback that we would have never thought of, right? So really using that. And then, our team is making multiple site visits to every property that we're going on. So it's, the site visit to choose the property, but then it's the site visit to choose the aesthetic and come up with the direction. And then it's the final site visit a couple months before we actually go. So many of these problems that I think at one point we would deal with on site, we deal with months in advance and find
Yeah.
solutions ahead of time, which is a better experience for everybody. And then I would say the last thing about this, attending other industry events has been so
Yeah.
insightful. You know, I think we're confident enough to say, right, that everything that we do doesn't have to be an idea that we came up with from
Of course.
scratch, right? We all
Yeah.
learn from each other and we, hear what works well and what doesn't. And so taking a lot of that information back and thinking, how can we lean into this or how can we lean away from this is also very beneficial.
Yeah, asking suppliers is something that I've done for years, and I'm not running events even close to the size that you are. Sorry, but it is amazing asking people who do this on an everyday basis is not a terrible idea, you know? And it was funny because I was recently, you'll love this. I went to speak at an event not too long ago, and I walked in and I was like, hey, where do I go for this? And they're like, hey, I'm not sure. This is my first time here. And it was like the person, it was their first time at the location. It was my first time too, but like and so like they didn't do a site visit in advance. I was like, well, this is going to go great. It's going to be amazing. So that's funny. So, okay. So final question for you. This has been great. You know, there's just so much advice out here, and obviously we're trying to provide value and give advice, but you know, not all advice is created equal, I think. So like, what is one piece of advice that you hear sometimes and you think that's just wrong?
So, I know we kind of cheated and you told me that you would answer or that you would ask this question. And
Yeah.
it's a difficult one for me.
Yeah.
But I think what I would have to actually say is, you know, people say, learn how to say no, learn how to draw boundaries. And I couldn't agree more. You have to create boundaries. But I've actually found that there are some times where, you know, I think that people are misinterpreting some of this and they actually use that as a crutch. So, you know, if you want to hit certain goals, you need to say yes to some opportunities that might be outside of your comfort zone. And I think that some people mislabel and they say, oh, I'm drawing a boundary. I'm working 8 hours. This would go over that. Sometimes you have to work past the 8 hour workday. You have to say yes to the speaking engagement that scares the shit out of you. You have
Yes.
to say okay to traveling on the weekend or taking a flight at 10 p.m. because it means that you can see this person. So yes, we need to set the boundaries in place for us. We need to make room to say yes to the right things, but don't lean in too far to that mentality that like, no, protect your peace, say no, you know, draw these impossible boundaries that don't let you actually grow can be really scary too. So I think we just need to take it with a grain of salt and be really careful. Are you saying no intentionally, or are you saying no because you're scared or unwilling to do the uncomfortable things? Sometimes you just have to cut your teeth, and that's what it is.
Wow, that is, I really like that, Taylor. That's, I ask this question a lot because it's interesting to get insight into what people think. And I really agree, because I think many times we're using these pieces of advice, you know, our brain's job is to keep us comfortable.
Yes.
Like keep us comfortable. Keep us safe. Yeah.
Keep us alive, but it's not to let us thrive. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And so I think sometimes we'll use that, hey, you know, that doesn't make me comfortable. And the reality of it is growth is almost always just outside of that comfort zone. So it's cliche because it's true, right? So I really like that, Taylor. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. Again, we've done it before. We will have to do it again, okay?
Yes, thank you so much. This has been great.
Cool. Well, that's going to wrap up this edition of Delivering Marketing Joy. We'll see you next time.